Hi everyone, I'm Robert. I will be walking you guys through some useful functions to do data management in R, particularly within the dplyr package. This video is a brief introduction to the dplyr package, as well as some simple functions to get us started in data management. So what is dplyr package? It is part of the tidyverse package collection specifically used for data science. The dplyr package is primarily used for data manipulations. It provides us a set of functions to deal with some common data manipulation challenges. In this module, we will be focusing on select, filter, arrange, mutate, summarize, and group by. Let's first define each of these functions. The select function allows us to select the columns or variables that we want to keep. The filter function allows us to keep the rows or observations that we need. The arrange function allows us to reorder the rows so we can use it to sort our datasets. The mutate function allows us to add new variables to the original dataset using the existing variables. For example, we may have GDP and population, these two variables in the original dataset. And we can create a new variable called GDP per capita by dividing GDP by population. And then we can use the mutate function to add this new variable into our dataset. Then we have summarize. This function collapses multiple observations into a single summary statistic. And then it will put all the summary statistics into a new data frame. Last but not least, we have group by. This function groups our observations based on some criteria. Unlike the previous functions, the group by function will not change how the dataset looks like. However, it especially comes in handy when we want to do group comparison on the dataset. For example, we may want to know what regions in the world have higher level of democracy, or what airlines have the most on-time flights. In these cases, we will need the group by function to break our observations into different groups and make comparison. We will talk about these functions in more details as the module progresses. Let's now install the packages that we will be using for this module. Aside from the tidyverse package, we will be using the hflights package. This package provides us with the Houston flights dataset. This dataset contains information on every departing flight from the two airports at Houston, Texas in 2011. As we can see here in line 30 and 31, we can use the install packages function to install the packages that we need. Please note that if you have previously installed the tidyverse package, you will not need to install it again for this step. Once you install a package, you will have it on your computer. But you still need to load these packages in using the library function every time when you open a new R session. Here in line 34 and 35, we will load in the two packages that we will be using. After loading in these packages, we may want to know more information about these packages. In this case, we can type a question mark followed by the thing that we want to search for. For example, in line 38, we type question mark followed by hflights. And when we run this, we can see at the lower right-hand corner that we get more information about the Houston flights dataset. For example, we can see what variables are in the dataset. These are pretty helpful information if we want to use a new dataset from a package. Similarly, in line 39, we type question mark followed by arrange. When we run this slide, we can get more information about the arrange function from the dplyr package. For example, we can see the usage and the arguments that we need to pass into. And at the end, we can even see some examples of how to use this function. This information are pretty helpful when we first get started with a new function, or sometimes we may forget how to use a function. We can search for these details in this way. But please note that we need to make sure we have loaded in the relevant packages before we can search for the datasets or functions within a package. Great. So now we have had all the packages loaded in. We can start to play around with the actual data. It's always a good practice to clear the global environment before we get started with a new project. The global environment refers to the upper right-hand corner, this section. As you can see now, I don't have any objects in my environment right now. So if you have some objects and you would like to clear them, you can use the command from line 43 to remove all the objects from the global environment. Alternatively, you can click on the little broom at the top of the section. And then this will also help you clear the global environment. After clearing out the environment, we may want to load in our new dataset. First, we will create a new data frame called DAT, and then we use the assignment operator to assign the Houston flights dataset to our DAT data frame. When we run this slide, we'll see our DAT data frame, and we can use the DAT data frame to access the Houston flights dataset. So we may want to take a look at our new data frame. One way to do so is to directly type in the name of the data frame, in this case, DAT. So when we run this slide, we can see in the console, we have the whole dataset. The RStudio will show it in our console. But as you can see here, when the dataset is pretty large, it's pretty inconvenient to see the whole dataset in the console. So alternatively, we can use the view function with the capital V. When we run this, we'll open up a new tab showing the whole dataset. Alternatively, we can directly click on the name of the dataset from the global environment. This will also give us a new tab showing the whole data frame. A lot of time we may not want to view the whole dataset. We may only want to see the first few rows or the last few rows. In these cases, we will be using the head function or the tail function. We run the head function, we'll get the first few rows of the dataset. And when we run the tail function, we'll get the last few rows of the dataset. We may also want to know how many rows and how many columns are there in our data frame. In this case, we'll be using nrow and ncolumn. So the nrow function will give us the number of rows, and the ncol function will give us the number of columns or the number of variables. And as you can see here, these results can also be found in the global environment. The number of rows and the number of columns are listed next to the name of the data frame. A lot of time, we not only want to know how many variables or columns we have, we want to know the name of the variables. In this case, we will be using the codename function. When we run this, we'll get a list of column names. These are all the variables that we have in our data frame. And we may also want to go one step further to get some summary statistics for each variable. In this case, we will be using the summary function. When we run this, we'll get a set of summary statistics for each variable that we have in our dataset. Please remember that the summary function here is different from the summarize function that I just talked about. Another useful function to know about is the str function, also called structure function. When we pass our object into this str function, it will return the object type of the thing that we pass into the function. In this case, it will be data frame. And it will also show the number of rows and number of columns, as well as the data type for each variable. The data type of variables are pretty important, as we can see in later videos on some dplyr functions. And then the table function is another useful function. The table function will return a list of unique values of a variable, and it will also tell us how many times each of these values occur in the dataset. When we run this, we can, when we pass the unique carrier into the table function, we can get all the unique carrier in this dataset, and we can see the number of times each unique carrier occurs in the Houston flights dataset. In the end, I want to emphasize the dollar operator that we use here. The dollar operator is a very useful operator for us to extract columns from the dataset. We can use it in some other functions as well. As we can see here, we can pass it into the head function to extract the departure time. In this case, we can see the first few rows of departure times. So this is a very useful operator that you will see it again and again in this module. So it will be helpful to know how to use it early on. These are basically everything for this introductory video. And we will start to learn about some dplyr function starting next time. So see you guys next time.